It's been less than a year now since we first learned a new Marvel MMO was in development. Back in November 2021, Enad Global 7 revealed that Dimensional Inc., the same studio behind DC Universe Online, would be making this game, and that the project would be led by Jack Emmert, who has a long history working on MMOs, including City of Heroes, City of Villains, DC Universe Online, and Star Trek Online. This announcement held a lot of promise at the time, I would say, being what looked to be one of the few upcoming AAA MMOs in development. Given it was using the Marvel IP, I just assumed a ton of money would be getting thrown at this project. Not that a lot of money ends up resulting in a good game. Well, any hope we had is no more, as we just recently learned that this Marvel MMO has already been canceled. It hasn't even been a full year, and the game's not getting made anymore. Although there is a silver lining here in that the company's decision to do this was driven by their desire to focus more on their existing IPs, which does include the EverQuest franchise. If a Marvel MMO had to be sacrificed to revive EverQuest next or to make some new EverQuest game, so be it. Before we get into all of the details though, and a bit of speculation, let's get a word from today's sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by Core. This is a free platform where anyone can create, share, and play multiplayer games. Currently, there are over 50,000 games available in a variety of different genres, from shooter to survival, platformer, adventure, and RPGs. In fact, right now, they're promoting Hellbreach, a horror FPS set in a post-apocalyptic world where you join the Army of Haven to fight back the forces of hell. You'll complete missions, fight bosses, and defend locations from waves of enemies, while also collecting resources, upgrading your gear, and strengthening your character. The game is available to play solo or with friends in groups of up to 3. Also, Core is currently hosting their very own Summer Bash from May 26th to June 2nd, featuring 25 games, each with exclusive giveaways. Hellbreach is one of those games, and playing it will let you claim a gift bag filled with special items and weapons. So if you're interested in checking out Hellbreach and Core for free, go ahead and use the link in the video description below. Okay, let's get into this story. So yesterday during an earnings report, the company that owns Dimensional Inc., Enad Global 7, announced that they would be canceling their in-development Marvel MMO. Now this decision, they say, came after reevaluating the risk associated with the investment, which they projected would cost somewhere around $50 million US, which, as an aside, can I just point out how abysmally small a number that is to be making a new MMO? Development costs for modern day games in this genre have been reportedly running somewhere in the ballpark of $200 million in recent years, with games like Elder Scrolls Online, Destiny, and New World running tabs at or well above that number, sometimes way above that number once you consider marketing cost. So the idea that they would be making a Marvel MMO for around $50 million, it seems like this thing may have just been doomed from the start. That is a very small amount of money to be trying to make a new MMO, a Marvel MMO. And you gotta wonder as well, how much of the cost would be going towards Marvel licensing fees? I'm sure that was no small portion of that $50 million either. Either way, it doesn't really matter because the game, as I said, has been canceled. No more Marvel MMO is being developed by Dimensional Inc. Instead, EG7 plans to spend that money diversifying into some of their smaller projects. It was specifically mentioned that they'd be spending money on Lord of the Rings Online and DC Universe Online, both of which already have major updates planned. On top of that, they are, quote, looking towards new game opportunities with our existing IPs, which should be noted again here, that does include the EverQuest franchise. Here's the official statement. The company had planned to invest more than SEK 500 million, that is roughly $50 million US, in the Marvel MMORPG project over the next 3 years. The company will now diversify this investment across multiple smaller size projects within the group, including the previously announced major upgrades to Lord of the Rings Online and DC Universe Online, and new game opportunities with our first-party original IPs. Now, this marks the third failed attempt at a Marvel MMO that comes to mind off the top of my head. There was Marvel Heroes, the free-to-play MMO ARPG RPG that was released back in 2013. While the game wasn't without its merit, it floundered overall. The critical scores were very low. I'm confident it had a player base, but critically it was just not considered a good game. And then Disney ended their relationship with the developer and the game shut down in 2017. But there was also Marvel Universe Online, and now this was an MMO that was being made back in like 2006, 2007. It was being developed by Microsoft. Originally, it was being made as a subscription game, but it was canceled after Marvel and Microsoft reportedly came to the decision that there was no more room in the MMO market for a subscription-based game. Apparently, they couldn't pivot to a free-to-play model, so they just ended the project entirely. There were also rumors, though, that the game had some massive unresolvable technical issues and that played a major role. But either way, Marvel MMOs are 0 for 3 as of my counting here. There's probably even more that I'm not considering at the moment. I do want to say, though, it is not all bad news today, because after announcing their decision to cancel the Marvel MMO, EG7 did go on to lay out their future near and longer term plans. So in the short term, they're going to be launching these games, Block and Load 2, Evil v Evil, and a few indie titles. Medium term, they've got the major updates to games like Lord of the Rings Online and DC Universe Online that we talked about, but also Magic Online's got some updates. And then longer term, as they mentioned, they do aim to invest in their first party titles. So here's where things get really interesting for me and what this might mean when it relates to EverQuest. So EG7 owns Daybreak Games. Daybreak Games was formerly Sony Online Entertainment, but they split off into 3 separate studios. Dimensional Inc., who, as we mentioned, they were working on that Marvel game before it was shuttered, but they also run DCUO. They also own Rogue Planet, who works on the PlanetSide franchise. And finally, Daybreak Games has Darkpaw Games, who support the existing EverQuest games, but also have been said to be developing the next innovation for the EverQuest franchise. Now, nothing official has ever been revealed since Daybreak formed into these 3 separate studios, and Darkpaw was working on whatever this is, but they have at least confirmed that something is in the works. Now, since we know EG7 is diverting some of their $50 million from this Marvel MMO into other projects, part of me does hope that this means that there's a chance we get a revival of EverQuest Next, or if that's too far-fetched, the next EverQuest project. It's something we've touched on in the past. In fact, earlier this year, a report came out as to why EverQuest Next was canceled in the first place. As part of this long-standing interview series that was hosted by former SOE developer Sean Lord, he sat down and spoke at length with Jeff Butler, who was a key player in the development of EverQuest Vanguard and EverQuest Next. And in a roughly 3-hour interview, they covered some of the various aspects of the development process for each of those games, but most interestingly to me were the bits of information about the development and the downfall of EverQuest Next. So what happened with the game, what led to its cancellation? Well, it came out that it was a lot more than just the reasons given back in 2016 when Next was canceled. During the press release announcing that cancellation, Daybreak's president at the time said, "Inherent to the creative process are dreaming big, pushing hard, and being brutally honest with where you land. In the case of EverQuest Next, we accomplished incredible feats that astonished industry insiders. Unfortunately, as we put together the pieces, we found that it wasn't fun, and in final review, we had to face the fact that EverQuest Next would not meet the expectations we and all of you have for the worlds of Norath." So simply put, they just didn't feel like when it all came together, it was going to be a good game that lived up to the EverQuest standard. Now, when asked in this interview what he thinks the real reasons were, Butler said, "My feeling is that when I left, there was no one left to push for EverQuest Next, no one at the highest level. Dave Georgeson was gone, I was gone, and the game left with us." So he felt, according to this interview, that without the proper motivation from the top, the head brass, the people pushing this stuff, the game didn't have the right people to continue development. If you don't recall, the other person that he referred to here, Dave Georgeson, was the very animated public-facing figure seen in a lot of these showcases for EverQuest Next. In fact, his enthusiasm alone is what initially got me excited about that game. Seeing someone so genuinely passionate and believing in what they're working on, it was great to watch, frankly. But it does go beyond the fact that they couldn't find the fun and not having the right people pushing for the game. Evidently, this was also the 7th attempt at making the game. The EverQuest Next that we knew when Landmark came out and Next was in development was their 7th shot at making that game, which just blows my mind. This iteration, he said, of EverQuest EverQuest had only been worked on for a fairly short time. The previous iterations were almost impossible to count. There were 7 subsets of what was going to be the next EverQuest. They'd work on it for a while, scrap it, build it up again. And boy, I guess that really explains why when Daybreak took over the company in 2016, if the game really wasn't still shaping up to what they were hoping, they just decided to scrap it all together. It's kind of crazy how much of troubled development history EverQuest Next had. It was really disappointing to learn about this. Now, whatever the reasons for the cancellation of EverQuest Next the first time around, I do imagine that it's crossed their mind using some of this work and those assets and everything. I mean, we had like a playable subset of EverQuest Next with EverQuest Next Landmark. I played that quite a bit and did, enjoy it for what it was. It was just like a crafting game, voxel mining and building up things, but it looked good. The engine was a little rough. It didn't run particularly good, but I saw promise there. Now, I don't know if you just, revived the corpse of EverQuest Next and tried to re-release it today, if it would at all stand a chance. But if nothing else, I have to imagine that they are considering possibly taking some portion of that work, of all that development time, and bringing it into the future. I think that's, I don't know, at least a possibility. I would hope so. But regardless, here we are. There was a Marvel MMO in development, and that is no more. And if nothing else, I'm hopeful that this could mean some of those funds get funneled into another MMO, because it's a very tough landscape out there for us fans of MMOs, and I would love to see something positive come of this. I hope they're not just investing in those older games. I'm glad they're supporting Lord of the Rings Online. I'm glad DCUO is going to get more support, but I'd like to see some new, fresh stuff. If it's not going to be this Marvel MMO, maybe it could be anything, literally anything else. All right, that does it for me today, guys. Before we go, though, I want to give another shout out and thank you to the sponsor of today's video, Core. And don't forget to check out Hellbreach and claim your free gift bag in that game, and using the link in the description below to download Core for free. And hey, maybe one of you can use Core to develop a new MMO. Is that maybe something that can happen? I don't know. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you in the next one, all right? Take it easy.